Welcome back to the deep dive. We actually have a very specific mission today.
We do, and it's a big one.
Yeah, it is. We are trying to map the distance
Mhm.
between the headlines you're seeing right now in your terminal, which look pretty bad, frankly,
Mm.
and the underlying structural shifts,
Right.
because those structural shifts look entirely different. We're calling this the gap between the mainstream narrative and triangulated reality.
Triangulated reality. It sounds a bit abstract, I know,
A little bit.
but that gap is exactly where the money is lost or made, depending on where you sit.
Hmm.
Because if you just look at the ticker tape right now, you see a tech sell-off. You just see red.
A sea of red.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if you look at the intelligence reports we've pulled for this deep dive, and we are looking at a serious stack today.
Oh, yeah. We've got Manal Mehta's latest market intelligence note. We've got internal forensic accounting data coming out of Moody's and some recovered field reports on supply chain fraud.
Right. And when you cross-reference all of that, you realize we aren't just in some routine market correction.
Well-
We are seeing the fracture of three major systems at exactly the same time. The software business model, the military procurement model, and, believe it or not, the biological speed limit.
The biological speed limit. And we're going to cover all three of those today.
We are.
We're going to talk about the bloodletting in sauce stocks
Mhm.
and these hidden debt bombs in big tech that absolutely nobody seems to be pricing in.
Which is terrifying.
Truly. Then we're going to look at a supply chain hack involving fake jet engine parts that literally grounded major airlines.
That one is going to make you think twice about flying.
It really is. And then we'll end on what I think is the most mind-bending topic of the entire stack, biological engineering that is effectively breaking the laws of evolution.
Breaking is definitely the right word. I mean, we're talking about bacteria evolving a million times faster than nature intended.
It's wild. But let's start with the money.
Let's do it.
If you hold U.S. software stocks right now, or private equity, this week has been just painful. We're seeing a massive unwind in names that were absolute darlings just 2 years ago. Workday, CrowdStrike, Datadog.
And you can't forget the grandfather of them all, IBM.
Right. IBM had its worst day since the dot-com bubble burst.
Yeah.
A 13% drop in a single session. Now, the headline, the mainstream narrative we keep hearing is that interest rates are staying higher for longer, so that's discounting future cash flows.
Standard Finance 101.
Exactly. But the reports we're looking at suggest that explanation is just lazy.
It is lazy. Look, I mean, rates matter, obviously, but
Yeah.
they don't cause a structural repricing of an entire sector overnight.
Right.
The actual catalyst was a combination of comments from Franklin Templeton's CEO and this viral research note that's been circulating on Wall Street trading desks all week.
And the thesis of that note is simple, but completely devastating.
Generative AI is creating an immediate pressure point for the entire SaaS business model.
Okay, let's drill down on that.
Yeah.
SaaS, software as a service.
Right.
This has been the greatest business model of the last 20 years. You build software once, you sell subscriptions, you get recurring revenue. It's the golden goose.
It was.
So why is AI killing that? Is it literally just that AI can write code now?
No, it's not just that AI can write code. It's much deeper. AI destroys the fundamental unit of economic value for these companies.
How so?
Think about it. For 20 years, Salesforce, Workday, all these huge companies, they charged you for seats.
Seat licenses, right?
Yes. You pay a monthly fee for every single human employee who logs into the system to do their work. The entire model relies on friction. It relies on the fact that humans need digital tools to do their jobs.
Okay, so the revenue is directly tied to your headcount. If I hire 50 sales reps, I have to buy 50 Salesforce licenses.
Exactly. But what happens when agentic AI, these AI agents that can autonomously execute complex tasks, starts doing the actual work?
Oh.
Right. If an AI agent can generate the quarterly report, update the customer database, and trigger the invoice without a human ever logging in, what happens to the seat license?
The seat is empty.
The seat is empty.
So the company just stops paying for it.
Or they pay significantly less. The intelligence report we have puts it this way. AI moves us from seat-based pricing to outcome-based pricing.
That's a huge shift.
It's a paradigm shift.
Yeah.
If I can get an AI agent to build a custom CRM for my specific business over a weekend, for a tiny fraction of the cost, why on earth am I paying Salesforce millions of dollars a year for a rigid, one-size-fits-all product?
It just commoditizes the solution completely.
Completely. And that realization right there, that is why you see panic spreading to private equity firms like KKR and Blackstone.
Because they are exposed.
Massively exposed. They loaded up on cheap debt to buy these software companies over the last decade, and when they modeled out their returns, they assumed that SaaS revenue was a forever annuity.
Right, they thought once a company installs this enterprise software, it's so painful to rip it out that they never leave.
The classic moat.
But if that moat is actually just a puddle,
And the recurring revenue is a melting ice cube.
then the debt they use to buy those companies becomes toxic.
Exactly. That's why the sell-off is so incredibly violent right now. It's not a blip. It's a complete repricing of the terminal value of the entire software industry.
That's a grim picture for the high flyers.
Yeah.
But let's look at IBM again. You mentioned they dropped 13%. Is that the exact same dynamic?
Well,
Because IBM isn't exactly a nimble little SaaS company. They're the guys managing the ancient mainframes in the basement of your bank.
and that is exactly why the contrarian view in our source material suggests IBM might actually be oversold right now.
Interesting.
Yeah, the market is panicking. They're selling everything that even smells like tech services because the baseline assumption is that AI agents will just replace human consultants overnight.
Will they, though?
Eventually, maybe. But right now, absolutely not. IBM's core business is updating legacy systems. We are talking about the plumbing of the global economy.
The stuff nobody wants to touch.
Exactly. We're talking about COBOL code from the 1970s that literally runs the global ATM network. Updating those systems isn't just about translating old code into new code, which AI is actually quite good at.
Right.
It's about complex systems integration. It's domain expertise. It's knowing which wire not to cut so the entire global banking system doesn't crash on a Tuesday.
So the argument is that AI makes the coding part easier, but the please don't crash the economy part still requires a highly paid human expert.
Precisely. The source suggests the market is having an emotional overreaction. They're dumping IBM because they think AI kills services.
Right.
When in reality, the sheer complexity of these legacy systems provides a much deeper moat than investors realize.
All right, so IBM might be a baby thrown out with the bathwater situation.
Right.
But speaking of hidden risks, I really want to pivot to this optical illusion in big tech accounting.
Oh, this is wild.
This part of the report genuinely shocked me, because we generally assume companies like Meta, Google, Oracle, that they are just cash printing machines.
Fortress balance sheets.
Exactly. But Moody's, the credit rating agency, is waving a massive red flag here.
And this is the story nobody's talking about on mainstream financial media. Moody's is warning that these tech giants are using special purpose vehicles, SPVs,
SPVs.
to hide tens of billions of dollars in liabilities related to the AI arms race.
Okay, just hearing the acronym SPV immediately triggers some PTSD from the Enron days.
Right.
Because that was the exact mechanism Enron used to hide their losses off the books.
It's a very similar mechanic, but legal. Well, compliant with the letter of the accounting laws, if not necessarily the spirit of them.
So how does the play actually work?
Here is the setup. Big tech desperately needs to build massive data centers for AI. We're talking about hyperscale facilities that cost $20–30 billion each.
Huge capital expenditure,
Exactly. Now, if they borrow that money directly, it sits right there on their balance sheet.
which they don't want.
They hate it. It lowers their return on invested capital. It scares shareholders who are used to seeing high-margin, asset-light software businesses.
So that they don't want the massive debt to show up.
Right. So instead of billing it themselves, they create a separate entity, an SPV.
Okay.
That SPV goes out, borrows the $30 billion, builds the data center, and then the tech giant simply leases the data center back from the SPV they created.
So they are renting the house they effectively built just to keep the mortgage off their own credit report.
That is the perfect analogy. But here is the highly technical accounting illusion that Moody's is calling out.
Okay.
Under current accounting rules, you only have to record that lease liability on your main books if the renewal of the lease is, quote, reasonably certain, end quote.
Reasonably certain.
And how exactly do the accountants define reasonably certain?
The standard is generally interpreted as a probability of greater than 70%. So these companies structure the lease contracts incredibly carefully. They make it so that the probability of them renewing the lease mathematically looks like it's, say, 60% or 65%.
Under the wire. Exactly. They incorporate penalties for non-renewal, but they keep those penalties just low enough that they don't trigger the probable threshold for recording a liability. The probable threshold is 50%.
That feels incredibly slippery because, let's be real, Meta obviously needs that data center. They aren't going to just walk away from a hyperscale AI facility that runs their core models.
Of course not. It's completely mission critical. Take Meta's Hyperion facility as an example. There is a $28 billion value guarantee attached to that project.
28 billion.
28 billion. That is effectively debt. But because of this probability game they're playing with the auditors, it appears absolutely nowhere on Meta's main balance sheet.
$28 billion.
Yep.
That is literally larger than the GDP of Iceland, just effectively hidden in the footnotes.
And the expert takeaway here is crucial for anyone listening who holds these stocks. The market is valuing these companies as asset-light software businesses, high cash, low debt.
Right.
But in reality, due to this massive AI infrastructure build-out, they are quietly becoming asset-heavy, highly leveraged utility companies.
Which trade at much lower multiples.
Exactly. If Moody's decides to force those liabilities onto the books, or if they downgrade their credit ratings because of the shadow leverage, the cost of capital shoots up, and the stock price will re-rate significantly downward.
It's a stark reminder that when the technology moves this fast, the accounting usually gets pretty creative to keep up.
Always does.
And speaking of fast-moving tech, let's look at the other side of the AI coin, the Pentagon.
Oh, yes.
We have a fascinating showdown happening right now between Silicon Valley culture and sheer military necessity.
This is Anthropic versus the Department of Defense. And honestly, it captures the mainstream narrative versus reality divide perfectly.
Set the stage for us. Because Anthropic is known as the AI safety company, right? They're the ones who originally split from OpenAI because they felt OpenAI was moving way too fast and breaking things.
Correct. Their entire brand identity is responsible AI. They want guardrails. They want mathematical assurances that their models aren't going to be used for biological weapons, mass surveillance, or automated cyber attacks.
Which seems completely reasonable from a civilian perspective. You don't want to build Skynet by accident.
It is reasonable.
Yeah.
But from the Pentagon's perspective, it's a total non-starter.
Why?
Because the military's entire job is lethality and speed. If you have an AI model on a battlefield that suddenly refuses to answer a tactical question about drone targeting because it violates a terms of service agreement drafted in San Francisco,
Right.
that software is actively dangerous to the soldiers using it. It's useless.
So we have a complete cultural deadlock. The Valley demands safety and guardrails, but the Pentagon demands absolute capability without hesitation.
And this deadlock creates a massive opening. This is where the second-order opportunity comes in for investors. While Anthropic sits there hesitating and demanding guardrails, who steps in to fill that multi-billion-dollar void?
Palantir. It's almost always Palantir in these defense reports.
No. It is. Palantir is defense native. They do not have the same cultural hangups as the Silicon Valley labs. Their tech stack, specifically their ability to operate in what's called IL-6 environments.
What's IL-6?
It's the top secret clearance level for government networks. Palantir's architecture is built for exactly what Anthropic is resisting.
So while the mainstream narrative is entirely focused on this philosophical AI safety debate, the reality on the ground is that military capital is just flowing around the roadblock to the companies willing to do the dirty work.
Mercenary isn't a bad word in defense contracting. It's basically a requirement.
Fair point.
Plus, Palantir software is designed to work in disconnected edge environments. Down on a submarine, in a Humvee in the desert, places where you absolutely do not have a live cloud connection.
Right.
Anthropic's frontier models are massive. They have to live in these multi-billion-dollar data centers we were just talking about, the completely different architecture.
Speaking of architecture and AI models, there's a note in the intelligence brief here about distillation attacks coming from China. This sounds like something straight out of a spy novel. What exactly is a distillation attack?
It's essentially industrial-scale plagiarism, but highly, highly technical. So in AI architecture, you have teacher models and student models.
Okay.
The teacher models are the huge, incredibly expensive frontier models like GPT-4 or Claude 3. They take billions of dollars to train. Student models are much smaller, cheaper, and more efficient.
Got it. So where does the attack come in?
Western AI labs are currently accusing Chinese labs of querying the Western teacher models millions and millions of times.
Through the API.
Yes. They feed it complex problems, they take the brilliant answers the teacher model generates, and they use that high-quality data to train their own local student models.
Oh, wow.
They are effectively distilling the intelligence of the American model into their own Chinese model.
So they completely skip the billions of dollars in R&D, they skip the massive compute cost to train the base model from scratch, and they just systematically copy the homework.
Exactly. It completely bypasses the need for those massive NVIDIA GPU clusters that the U.S. government is actively trying to block China from buying.
That is incredibly clever.
It's a brilliant, asymmetric way to close the tech gap. And the implication for us is that we are going to see a massive, unprecedented crackdown on open source models and API access.
We'll have to lock it all down.
They will.
Hmm.
The U.S. government is going to start viewing these AI model weights as highly classified state secrets.
So the tech Cold War is shifting. It's moving from controlling the hardware, the physical chips, to controlling the software weights themselves.
It has to, because the software is leaking.
All right, let's pivot from digital threats to a very physical, very immediate threat, the paper crisis in aviation.
This one is rough.
Honestly, this story about the fake jet engine parts is, look, I fly a lot. Reading this made me seriously want to start taking the train everywhere.
It's the very definition of a black swan event that, in hindsight, was completely predictable. The entire scandal centers on a relatively obscure company called AOG Technics, based over in the UK.
And this company was run by a former DJ, right?
Yes, Jose Alejandro Zamora Urella, a former techno DJ who somehow pivoted to becoming an aerospace supplier. He was actually recently sentenced to prison
A good reason.
because he sold over 60,000 counterfeit aircraft parts to major Tier 1 airlines. We're talking Delta, United, American Airlines.
60,000 parts. And just to be clear for you listening, we aren't talking about plastic crate tables or cosmetic seat covers. These were critical internal parts for the CFM56 engine.
Right, which is the single most common jet engine in the world. It's the workhorse of the sky. It powers the Boeing 737 and the Airbus A320 family.
So basically every domestic flight.
If you have flown anywhere in the last 10 years, you have almost certainly been pushed through the sky by a CFM56 engine.
So how does a former DJ successfully fake 60,000 highly engineered turbine parts? Did he build a secret underground manufacturing plant?
That's the craziest part of the whole report. He didn't manufacture anything.
What did he do?
He just bought scrap parts. Parts that were old, worn out, broken, or completely unverified from scrap yards. And then he just used Photoshop.
Wait, Photoshop? For jet engines?
Yes, because the aerospace industry, for all of its incredibly advanced aerodynamics and engineering, still relies on an antiquated analog paper-based verification system.
You're kidding.
Every single part that goes into a plane comes with a physical document called an authorized release certificate. It's literally just a piece of paper with a stamp and a signature.
And he just forged the pieces of paper.
He sat at a computer and forged thousands of them.
That is terrifyingly simple. So the highly trained mechanic at Delta gets the physical part, looks at the piece of paper in the box, sees that the stamp looks official enough, and just installs it into a jet engine.
Correct. Because the entire system isn't digitally native or centralized, there was no easy, instant way for that mechanic to cross-check the certificate number against an immutable central database.
Wow.
It's a fundamentally trust-based system operating in a zero-trust world.
And the financial fallout from this?
It's massive. Airlines are actively having to ground planes to physically inspect the engines. American Airlines alone spent roughly $30 million just to audit their own fleet to hunt down these fake parts.
$30 million just to look for a needle in a haystack.
And you have to understand the mechanics of this. You can't just pop the hood of a jet engine and look inside.
Right, it's not a Honda Civic.
To find a specific counterfeit turbine blade or a tiny titanium bushing, you often have to completely tear the engine down.
Which takes time.
It takes the plane completely out of commercial service for weeks. The lost revenue is staggering.
It just seems insane to me that we can track a fraction of a Bitcoin transaction across the globe in milliseconds, but we literally cannot cryptographically verify a part that keeps 300 people from falling out of the sky.
It's a 20th century analog system in a 21st century digital world, and honestly, that's the alpha play here. That's the investment angle.
Because things have to change.
This scandal has created absolute board-level panic and urgency for digital verification. They have no choice but to upgrade immediately.
Right.
I mean, luxury goods are already miles ahead of aerospace. If you go buy a high-end handbag from certain fashion houses right now, it comes with a digital product passport.
Like an NFT for a bag.
Exactly. An NFC chip or a blockchain token that definitively proves its lineage and authenticity. The fact that a leather handbag has better supply chain security than a commercial jet engine is deeply humiliating for the aerospace industry.
So the smart money is looking at companies that provide that digital chain of custody.
Digital logistics, enterprise blockchain verification, secure supply chain tracking. This whole disaster is a massive flashing buy signal for that entire software sector.
Okay, let's stay on that theme of verification, but move from tracking parts to tracking people.
Ah, the blast radius.
Yes. The intelligence report has a really fascinating section on what they call reputational contagion, and it connects specifically to the lingering fallout from the Jeffrey Epstein scandal.
This is a textbook example of asymmetric risk. We're seeing it play out right now in real time with a company called LifeTouch. You know who they are.
LifeTouch, are they the school photography company?
Yeah.
Like the ones who take the awkward middle school yearbook photos with the laser backgrounds?
The very same. They are currently facing massive boycotts and sudden contract cancellations from school districts all across the United States.
Why? Did their photographers do something wrong?
No, the photographers did nothing. Here's the chain of contagion. LifeTouch is owned by a company called Shutterfly.
Okay.
Shutterfly is owned by a massive private equity firm called Apollo Global Management.
Still tracking.
Apollo's founder and former CEO, Leon Black, had documented personal financial ties to Jeffrey Epstein.
Wait, so let me make sure I have this straight. A local public school district is firing their yearbook photographer because the photographer is owned by a holding company, which is owned by a massive investment firm, whose founder, who isn't even the CEO of the firm anymore, knew Epstein.
Exactly. That is the blast radius in action. The actual connection is incredibly tenuous and distant. But for a local school board, the risk calculation is entirely asymmetric.
Meaning there's no upside for them to keep the contract.
None. If they keep the contract and one angry parent discovers this distant connection and posts about it on Facebook, it becomes a local PR nightmare.
Right.
If they cancel the contract, it's just an administrative headache to find a new photographer. So they take the easy route, they cancel.
It's guilt by association taken to a terrifying institutional level.
And this has huge immediate implications for investors. It means your due diligence isn't just looking at the balance sheet anymore. You have to actively vet your partners.
Forensic social mapping.
Exactly. The report actually specifically warns about holding luxury brands in this environment.
Brands like Kering.
Kering, who owns Balenciaga, is a prime example. These brands are heavily reliant on celebrity ambassadors to drive sales. But in this environment of hyper-fast reputational contagion, if a brand ambassador gets canceled online,
Or if a creative director pushes the envelope too far.
like the Balenciaga ad campaign scandal a while back, the brand equity, which took decades to build, can be vaporized overnight.
It's an incredibly fragile business model when your entire corporate valuation is tied to fickle public perception in the age of viral social media.
And we should note, it's not just corporate business, it impacts global politics too. The report mentions Peter Mandelson over in the UK.
He's a huge political figure there.
Massive. And he was recently arrested on suspicion of misconduct regarding leaks related to Epstein. It's actively destabilizing the current UK government.
Wow.
It just shows that these ghosts of the past can resurface at any moment and completely derail a seemingly stable system.
So diligence today is fundamentally about mapping human networks just as much as financial ones.
Precisely.
Okay, let's move over to the regulatory landscape.
Yeah.
Because we have some very clear winners and losers emerging from the swamp of Washington, D.C. right now. First up is what the report calls the hemp apocalypse.
This is such a fascinating story of ruthless corporate warfare.
Walk us through it.
So back under the 2018 Farm Bill, there was a specific legal loophole created. It effectively legalized hemp-derived products as long as they contained less than 0.3% delta-9 THC.
Right, which inadvertently gave rise to this massive booming market of THC beverages.
Exactly.
Brands like Can and Wink. You can literally buy them in standard liquor stores in some states. You drink one, you get a little buzz, but it's technically legally classified as hemp, not marijuana.
And that gray market grew incredibly fast. It's now worth roughly $1.3 billion. But here is the fatal problem they ran into.
They got too big.
They got too big, and they started actively eating into traditional alcohol sales. Consumers were going to the store and swapping out their six-pack of beer for a four-pack of THC seltzer.
And big alcohol obviously didn't like that.
Big alcohol hated it. So what happened? A federal spending bill loophole closure championed, notably by Mitch McConnell, is now effectively banning these specific hemp-derived products by November 2025.
The report calls it a corporate assassination.
Which is exactly what it is.
So this sudden ban wasn't really driven by some new public health data or safety concern.
Look, the Wall Street Journal explicitly noted that powerful alcohol lobbyists heavily push for this specific ban. They realized they couldn't compete with the new product on the retail shelf, so they just lobbied to legislate it out of existence.
That is absolutely brutal. So what actually happens to that $1.3 billion market? Does demand just vanish?
The demand doesn't vanish, but the capital does. It vanishes from the independent startup companies that built the category, and it will flow right back to big alcohol, who will inevitably launch their own heavily regulated, heavily taxed versions down the road.
Of course they will.
Or the capital flows to the legal cannabis multi-state operators, the MSOs, who already hold the expensive state licenses to sell high THC products.
So the ultimate lesson here for you as an investor is, if you find a clever regulatory loophole that makes you a ton of money, you better expect the massive incumbents to eventually notice and close it.
Every loophole has a shelf life. The incumbents always strike back.
All right, now what about this carbon credit crash? This seems like another massive regulatory mess, but playing out on a global scale.
It is a global mess. So the UN has an aviation emissions program called CORSIA. Basically, international airlines are mandated to buy carbon credits to offset their jet fuel emissions.
Okay, standard cap and trade concept.
Right. And they need about 200 million carbon credits to legally comply with the upcoming phase of the program.
200 million. And how many verified credits are actually available on the open market right now?
About 32 million.
Well, that seems like a fundamental math problem.
It's a huge problem.
200 million required demand, but only 32 million in supply. Where did all the credits go?
Host countries. Places like Brazil, Indonesia, nations with massive rainforests, they are flat out refusing to export their carbon credits to the airlines.
Why?
Because they are hoarding them. They realize they need to show those exact same credits on their own ledgers to meet their own sovereign Paris Agreement climate targets. So everyone is double counting or hoarding the offsets. But if a major airline literally cannot buy the credits they are legally required to hold, what do? They can't just stop flying international routes.
No, they can't stop flying. But they have one and only one other authorized option under the UN framework. They have to buy sustainable aviation fuel, SF. It's the only alternative way to comply with the mandate.
But SF is significantly more expensive than regular jet fuel, isn't it?
It's vastly more expensive. But here is the kicker. Because the demand is legally inelastic, meaning the airlines absolutely have to comply or face grounding, they will be forced to buy the S at whatever the market price is.
Wow.
This creates a massive guaranteed demand spike for the specific refiners who produce SF.
And the intelligence report highlights Valero here.
Yes. Valero, ticker VLO. They are currently one of the largest producers of renewable diesel and SAF in the world. They are sitting directly on the only legal solution to a problem the airlines are forced to solve.
So Valero essentially wins a massive windfall because the UN carbon credit market functionally broke down. That's the second-order effect we keep talking about. While everyone else is wringing their hands about the failure of global carbon markets, the smart money sees that the physical refiners are about to print cash.
Okay, let's zoom out from specific sectors to the broader macro picture. Housing and manufacturing. The dominant narrative we keep hearing from analysts is the coming refinance boom.
Right.
Story goes, as soon as the Fed aggressively cuts rates, the market unfreezes. Everyone is going to finally move, buy a new house, buy a new fridge, buy a new car.
That's the optimistic hope. But the triangulated intelligence suggests the market is deeply frozen for a totally different reason. Just look at Whirlpool.
The appliance giant.
Yes. Look at their data. Their high-margin sales. We're talking the fancy smart fridges with the screens, the high-end double ovens. Those sales have plummeted from 60% of their total volume down to under 40%.
Simply because people aren't moving into new homes.
People aren't moving because of the lock-in effect. If you secured a 3% 30-year mortgage during the pandemic, you are absolutely not going to sell that house to buy a slightly bigger one at 6 or 7%.
It makes no financial sense.
Exactly. So you stay put And because you stay put, you don't do a massive kitchen renovation. You don't buy the brand new luxury appliances.
But the report goes much darker than just a temporary interest rate freeze. It calls this a secular decline.
And this is the truly scary part of the macro analysis. The expert warning to investors is, do not believe the rebound hype for 2026.
Why not?
Because the core customer base for high-end consumer durables is permanently shrinking. The middle class is hollowing out. Young people simply cannot afford to buy homes, period.
Right, because if you are indefinitely renting an apartment, you don't go out and buy a $3,000 smart refrigerator.
Yeah.
Your landlord buys the absolute cheapest white plastic box that keeps the milk cold, and that's it.
Exactly. The structural baseline demand for premium household goods is evaporating because the wealth accumulation trajectory of the younger generation has completely stalled.
Wow.
So taking a short position on Whirlpool isn't just a tactical bet against the current housing cycle. It's fundamentally a macro bet on long-term generational inequality.
That is incredibly depressing. But to be fair to the source material, the report does mention a contrarian view on this.
Yes, it does. Some analysts still argue strongly for a bullwhip effect. They believe that once rates do drop significantly, there is just so much suppressed, pent-up demand out there that we will see a massive, violent explosion in consumer buying.
But the sources we're looking at don't buy that.
No, our source material leans heavily bearish here. They think the structural affordability crisis in housing is way too deep to be magically fixed by a 50 basis point rate cut from the Fed.
Well, take a deep breath, because we are heading to the final section of the brief. And this is the one I have honestly been waiting for.
The deep, deep dive.
Frontier science and biotech.
This is where things get genuinely wild. We are moving from macroeconomics to literally hacking the biological speed limit.
Let's start with bioelectronics, specifically vagus nerve stimulation, or VNS. Now, we've known for a while that physically zapping the vagus nerve, which is the major nerve running from your brain down to your gut, that doing that helps treat severe epilepsy.
Right. Doctors have used pacemaker-like electrical implants for years for this, but the crazy thing is we didn't actually know how it worked.
We just knew it did.
Exactly. We assumed it was just the electrical current directly calming the misfiring neurons in the brain, but brand new frontier research shows it's actually changing the physical makeup of the gut microbiome.
Wait, so zapping your neck with electricity physically alters the bacteria living in your stomach?
Yes, it is wild. Specifically, the electrical stimulation massively increases a specific strain of bacteria called Akkermansia, as well as a compound called butyrate.
What does it do?
They are powerful, natural, anti-inflammatory compounds.
Okay, but how do the scientists actually know it's the stomach bacteria doing the heavy lifting and not just the electricity in the brain?
This is the absolute smoking gun of the study. They took the poop fecal matter from a mouse that had been actively treated with the electrical VNS implant.
Okay.
And they transplanted that fecal matter into a totally different mouse that had never been treated with electricity.
And what happened?
That second mouse instantly gained neurological protection from seizures.
That is completely mind-blowing. So the electricity forced the gut to manufacture the medicine, and that biological medicine is fully transferable to another host.
Exactly. It completely opens up the door for what they are calling electrobiotic therapies.
Electrobiotics.
Imagine having a tiny neural implant that stimulates your vagus nerve, but it's specifically combined with a targeted probiotic pill you swallow to amplify the exact bacterial response.
A closed loop.
It's a whole new paradigm for treating chronic disease. It's not just chemical pharmacology, and it's not just electrical stimulation. It's a synthetic hybrid of both.
Okay, next up in the biostack, Vinerep, which honestly sounds like a villain from a Marvel movie.
It really does. It stands for a system of extreme evolution. So scientists started with a bacteria called Vibrio natrigens,
Okay.
which is already famous in biology for being the absolute fastest growing organism we know of. It reproduces incredibly fast.
And they decided to make it faster.
They didn't just make it grow faster, they made it evolve faster. They genetically engineered its specific DNA polymerase, which is the biological enzyme responsible for copying DNA during cell division. And they intentionally made it highly error-prone.
Wait a second. In biology, usually errors in DNA copying are a very bad thing. Errors mean mutations, which usually mean cancer or cell death.
Usually, yes, it's fatal. But if you are trying to force an organism to evolve a brand new physical trait, you absolutely need errors. You need rapid mutations to test new variations.
Right.
So they created a controlled system where this specific bacteria mutates 1 million times faster than the normal background evolutionary rate.
1 million times fast.
Yes. In the practical experiment, they wanted this bacteria to learn how to metabolize ethanol. Now, usually, for an organism to evolve an entirely new, complex metabolic pathway from scratch, it takes thousands and thousands of years of slow, natural selection.
Sure.
Under the Wiener system, the bacteria evolved the ethanol pathway in 16 hours.
15 hours to accomplish thousands of years of evolutionary trial and error.
It's effectively breaking the biological speed limit. They took the evolutionary speedometer and just shattered it.
But hold on, doesn't that immediately kill the bacteria? If you induce that massive volume of genetic mutations that quickly, surely the structural integrity of the organism just falls apart and it dies.
And that is the absolute genius part of the engineering. They combine the hypermutation with something called polyploidy.
Polyploidy.
Right, so humans are diploid. We have 2 copies of our genome. These scientists engineered the bacteria to hold dozens and dozens of redundant backup copies of its entire genome at the same time.
Oh, I see.
So even if 10 or 15 copies get completely corrupted and destroyed by the rapid mutations, there are still enough clean backup copies running to keep the cell alive and functioning.
That's incredible.
The report compares it to giving a race car 20 spare tires, so it can drive at 500 miles per hour over a bed of spikes without crashing.
So what is the actual commercial application to this? Do you just use it to make Godzilla in a lab?
No, you make highly customized industrial tools. You could take this engineered bacteria, dump it into a massive vat of toxic chemical waste, turn on the hypermutation, and literally evolve it overnight to eat that specific synthetic toxin.
Wow.
Or you evolve it in a few days to excrete a highly complex pharmaceutical drug that currently costs billions to synthesize. It is considered the holy grail of bioremediation and next-generation biomanufacturing.
That is incredibly cool, but also slightly terrifying to think about. I mean, if an organism mutating 1 million times faster than normal somehow got out of the containment lab.
Well, that's exactly why we have highly secure biosafety labs.
Yeah.
The commercial potential is absolutely limitless.
Speaking of modifying biology, let's talk about human brain hacking, the section here on the spectral loop.
This is a major breakthrough in cognitive boosting. So current brain stimulation tech things like TDCS, transcranial direct current stimulation, they operate on what's called an open loop,
Reading.
meaning the device is just always on. It's constantly pushing a low level of current into your brain. The analogy the report uses is that it's like constantly pouring espresso down your throat to stay awake.
It works, but you get incredibly jittery.
Exactly. It works, but it's an incredibly blunt instrument. It's
Yeah.
inefficient and exhausting for the brain over long periods.
So how is the spectral loop different?
The spectral loop uses focused ultrasound instead of electricity, and crucially, it operates on a closed loop. It actively monitors your live brain waves using a built-in EEG.
Okay.
It patiently waits for your brain to naturally enter a suboptimal state, like a momentary glitch in your attention span or a micro moment of distraction. And only in that exact millisecond does it zap your cortex with a highly precise pulse of ultrasound to nudge your focus back on track.
So it's basically on-demand focus. It only boosts you when you start to slip.
Exactly. It's vastly more energy efficient, and it actually trains the neural pathways rather than just aggressively overstimulating them. The military is looking at this as the future of enhancing cognitive performance for high-stakes, high-fatigue jobs.
Like fighter pilots or combat surgeons.
Exactly.
Fascinating. And finally, before we wrap up, we have to quickly touch on the GLP-1 ripple effects. Because we've obviously talked about Ozempic and Mounjaro for weight loss a million times on this show.
Everyone has.
But the long-term medical data is starting to show a massive secondary effect.
Yes. It dramatically improves kidney function.
Which sounds like fantastic news for public health. Unless, of course, you happen to own a massive chain of dialysis clinics.
Correct. Look at Fresenius Medical Care. They are a giant in the global dialysis industry, and they recently saw their stock drop significantly simply because their forward-looking patient volumes are visibly shrinking.
Because fewer obese and diabetic patients are actually progressing to the end stage of kidney failure, where they physically require dialysis.
Yes. If the GLP-1 drug successfully halts the long-term progression of chronic kidney disease, The patient never needs to be hooked up to the machine.
Wow.
It is a profound, life-changing win for millions of patients, an absolute financial massive win for drug makers like Eli Lilly, and a total existential threat to the legacy dialysis service industry.
It's just another one of those massive second-order effects. You set out to invent a blockbuster weight loss drug, and you accidentally cure end-stage kidney failure, quietly wiping out a multi-billion-dollar service industry in the process.
Everything in the system is deeply connected. You just have to look past the first domino.
So let's try to synthesize all of this for you listening. We started today looking at AI completely crashing legacy software stocks. We moved to a DJ faking airplane parts. We looked at how distant associations can destroy corporate reputations. And we ended with bacteria evolving at the speed of light. What is the actual common thread tying this all together?
The thread is that the mainstream narrative always assumes the world is linear. It assumes A directly leads to B.
Right.
But the triangulated reality is that the global economy is a highly sensitive, interconnected web. The accounting rules change at Moody's, and Mehta suddenly has billions in hidden debt. A DJ learns how to use Photoshop, and Delta Airlines is forced to ground a commercial fleet. A researcher zaps a nerve in your neck, and the bacteria in your stomach completely changes.
The world is just messier, faster, and far more fragile than the daily headlines suggest.
And for you listening, the ultimate takeaway has to be rigorous skepticism. You need to be deeply skeptical of these optical illusions in financial accounting. Just because a tech giant looks incredibly rich on paper doesn't mean it isn't quietly operating with massive leverage.
Right.
Be skeptical of analog paper systems trying to survive in a zero-trust digital world. And always, always keep an eye out for the second-order winners.
Like Valero winning simply because the UN carbon market failed.
Or Palantir winning massive contracts just because the military fundamentally cannot afford to wait for Silicon Valley safety guardrails.
Here is my final thought for today, and I really want you to just mull on this. If AI can now autonomously code better than we can, rapidly stripping away our baseline economic value in software, and if biological systems can now literally be engineered to evolve 1 million times faster than nature ever intended, are we rapidly approaching a point where the sheer speed of innovation completely outpaces our human ability to even measure the risk?
I mean, if the bacteria successfully evolves in 16 hours, but the government regulation takes 16 months to draft,
Yeah.
we have a very serious problem.
That is a terrifying thought to leave on. But that's exactly why we do the deep dive. See you in the next one.
See you then.